Shalom. The title of this message is No More Doubts. I am called Thomas, or the others who don't speak Hebrew, it would be Didymus. In either case, both these words mean twin. Now there are some who thought that I was called twin because I was born a twin. And my parents named me Thomas because of that. But please, if I'm a twin and my parents name me twin, what will they name my brother? Are we twin one and twin two? Other people thought perhaps that I was called twin because of the similarity of my appearance with either Jesus or someone else. Neither of these is the case. Instead, it was more a matter of my friends among Jesus and the apostles thinking of me in my emotional states. For sometimes I could be very optimistic and other times very pessimistic. I could spend one day being rather grouchy, and another day I'm very upbeat and ready to go. And so sometimes early on, when we would get up from wherever we were camping, get ready to go on with the day, I could hear a couple of them talking at the campfire for breakfast, saying, "Well, I wonder who he will be today." And so it was a matter of, is he going to be Thomas we know, or will it be his twin, the other personality? And I took it as a joke, and it just stuck with me that was my name, twin, and I accepted it. My given name was so common and unheld by others that I decided something else would be fine with me anyway. I'm here today with you to talk about having no more doubts. That's not how I started out. I question most everything. And I have no apologies for that whatsoever. That I come to my faith very seriously. I want to look at it with all the questions that I might have. And when I followed Jesus, I followed it believing, but still having many questions not yet answered. And so I made a practice of listening carefully and asking questions whenever I felt the need. Oftentimes it would be a different mood I might have from the others, and yet it wasn't always that I was just a follower dragging my feet on things. Sometimes I was the leader, the first to decide to do something. I guess my first example of my life and my doubts was when we were camping towards the end of the ministry with Jesus, and we were camping out on the east side of the Jordan River. And Jesus says he's planning on going up to Jerusalem. We'd have to cross the river, go through Jericho, and up the mountains to Bethany, and then on to Jerusalem. And he was planning on going to Bethany because we had heard about Lazarus becoming sick. And Jesus said it was time to go, and we're all thinking, no, because we'd be killed. They had promised that the next time we come, these rulers who hated Jesus enough to have said that they would stone him, and could our deaths be very far behind. As we wanted to talk about it and say, Jesus, if he's only sleeping, he'll wake. If he's sick, we can make him well later. This is a dangerous time. Jesus didn't listen. Jesus simply took off walking towards where he wanted to go. And we just sat there and kind of looked at each other thinking, what's going to happen now? I shrugged my shoulders and got up. And I said, well, let's go die with him. Why live without him, right? We might as well go with him and take whatever the consequences might be. And so while I doubted the results, I was still so tied in my heart and mind to Jesus being my rabbi and who I believed would be what God had in mind for us as a Messiah. I had nowhere else to go. At this point, my life was committed to him, even though I had doubts about what might happen later. The others then followed as well. They followed me, I'm following Jesus, and we headed on up to whatever the future might hold for us. While we were in the city close to Jerusalem that last week, where Jesus was trying to explain things to us, we were grasping the fact that he planned on being arrested and beaten and put to death by the Romans and the Jewish leadership. And we're thinking, wait a minute, over 3 years we've been following this man. We have no other life. We want no other life. How can this be? What would life be like without Jesus? I would ask you to consider for a moment right now, what would your life be like without Jesus in it? If you could say my life would be no different, it's because Jesus is not in your life. But if Jesus is in your life, it changes everything, doesn't it? So when we're being told by Jesus that he's going to be taken from us and killed, we won't have him to follow around. We won't have him to listen to. Our life is thrown totally out of kilter. And we were in depression there. And Jesus was trying to tell us, let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you, I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go, I will come again to take you to where I am, that there you may be also. And then he said, and you know the way to where I'm going. We kind of looked at each other a little bit, and I waited to see if someone else would say something, but they didn't, so I did. Jesus, we do not know where you're going. We don't even know where you're going. How can we know the way to get there? That's when Jesus said, I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father but by me. That was me expressing my doubts. I don't know the way. And then he tells me, I did know the way. My doubts are saying, I don't, but he's saying, if I know him, I know the way. And there might be some times in your life when you're questioning too, I don't know, I can't point to heaven. I can't tell somebody how to get there by a map. I don't know the way. And you stop and remember, you do know the way, because the way is not on a map. The way is in a person. And it's Jesus in your life as Savior and Lord. That's the way to heaven. And no one comes to the Father but by him. I have some other examples of stories I want to tell you about. And that, I guess one comes later. Well, let's just say, on that fateful night when Jesus is arrested, we're with him there in the Garden of Gethsemane. And the mob comes, led by none other than Judas. I was ashamed to know him. How could he do this? What would I do if I was going to confront him after this? But that wasn't uppermost in my mind at the time. I was afraid. This is a mob of people, armed people, lanterns and torches and cudgels, all kinds of knives. They were ready to mob and to get him and attack us if necessary. And when Peter tried to start a little fight, 13 of us against all of them, Jesus stopped him. And so at that point, when he was surrendering himself to arrest, we didn't know what to do. We never talked about it. There wasn't time. We just all made the same decision. Run! Run! And so I turned and I ran off into the darkness amidst the olive groves there. Now, the grove is all around the Garden of Gethsemane. And I ran for a while, bumped into a few bushes and trees, and finally hid myself and stayed very quiet. Jesus had been arrested. And there was no way to go to him now, except through the Roman army or the religious authorities. I didn't know what to do. And there I am that night. I'm getting cold in the night, and none of the others are around me. I am by myself. When dawn came, I made my way back into the city, slightly disguised, to find out what's going on. The trial had already been held by the time I got the news that Jesus had been condemned to a cross. And so I knew where they put crosses up on the north side of the city, on the road towards Damascus, so that everybody could see what happens to those who defy the Romans. And so I went to that place, but not nearby. I stayed back at a distance to watch to see what was going on. I don't know about other disciples having been there at the time. I was by myself, watching from a distance. The ones closer up, there was some mocking him. There were some soldiers crucifying him. There was two men charged as being thieves, one on either side, being crucified as well. And there was John and Mary, mother of Jesus, and a couple of other women there, brave enough to be close by where I was too afraid. I doubted for my safety. But I saw him die, and I turned and walked away. That was on Friday, the afternoon. The next day, I had camped out by myself. I knew not what to do. When I woke that day, it was the saddest day of my life. All my life, I had grown up a good Jew. I had gone every morning, wake up saying, there is a God, and he is in control of this world, and life is good. Everything's all right. Well, it might be bad sometimes, but God is still in charge. And that day I woke up, that Saturday, and I'm thinking, my Messiah is dead. I have nowhere to go, no one to follow, no one to walk with. Now I don't know what to do. I was in a fog all that day. And the next day as well. Well, at the end of the day for Sunday, apparently things happened elsewhere. And some of the disciples of Jesus, when they found me, said, you should have been here. I said, why? What's so special about now? Everything's gone. Everything's different because Jesus is dead. And they said, no, he's not. No, he's not. Jesus is alive. Some of the women saw him early that morning, and they told me the stories. They were fantastic stories, told by women whose word might not be even listened to in a court of law. And then they told me about some men who had been on a road to Emmaus, and that they were walking along and not knowing who was the one who joined them, later to find out it was Jesus. And that if I had been with them in the upper room that night before, I'd have been there when Jesus entered the room, that he had shown himself alive to the disciples. And they were telling me, it's true, Thomas, it's true. And I said, you don't understand. I pinned all my hopes, my whole life on that man. And I want to believe what you're saying, but I was there. I watched him die. It was ugly. It was embarrassing. It was horrifying. It was evil. He was dead. I was there, and I saw him bleeding from the crown of thorns on his head. I saw him bleeding from the wounds in his hands and feet. I was there when the soldier thrust a spear into his heart. He was dead. They said, Thomas, don't you believe in resurrection? Didn't you see Jesus raise people from the dead? I said, yes, I did. Well, then it's possible. I said, wait. I saw Jesus raise a young man from up in Cana as they're parading his body out to the graveyard. He raised that young man. They said, yes. And I said, I saw Jesus when he had this young girl pronounced dead, Jairus' daughter, and yet he raises her from the dead. I saw her alive afterwards. And they said, yes. And I said, and I was there in Bethany with the rest of you when we're there at the graveside, and Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. And the stone is there still in the way, and Jesus wants it rolled out, and what do the sisters of the man say? The smell will be too bad. He's 4 days dead. And they said, don't you remember Lazarus was raised? And I said, yes, I do. In all those cases, I remember Jesus raised the dead. But I have never seen a resurrection unless Jesus was raised from the dead. So if Jesus is dead, that won't happen anymore. I won't believe it until I put my finger in the hole in his hand, in my hand in the stab wound in his side that I saw the Romans put. I'm sorry. I want to believe it. I really do. But it doesn't make sense to me that somehow this could have happened without Jesus making it happen. And if he's dead, I don't understand, and so I doubt. Well, I didn't spend a lot of time with them during that next week, but I decided to join them the following Sunday night, and so we gathered. I had actually been at the temple for the Shabbat the day before and worshipped on my own, and then I joined them the next night. And while we were there, still afraid for what could happen to the rest of us as followers of Jesus, we made sure the doors were locked, downstairs and upstairs. The windows were shut, so that there was no way anybody could come in on us. There we were, and in the midst of the room, all of a sudden, Jesus appears right there. We're all shocked, of course, but the rest of it break into big smiles, and I take a step back, and Jesus looked right at me. He said, "Put your finger there. Put your hand in my side and see if it's not really me and I'm really alive." I didn't put my finger there. I didn't put my hand there. I saw the wounds. I heard the voice of my master. And now I realize here's something more. My Lord and my God. You are my Lord and my God. You only God could do this. And he then suggested that it was wonderful that I could now have no more doubts. But how wonderful it would be for those who did not see him like this and could still believe, as would be the truth for many of you. You weren't there that night, but you might have your own experiences with Jesus, and I would wish it so, whatever it takes to remove your doubts, because your life can be full of joy and wonder and power once you come to the point in your life where you have no more doubts that Jesus is alive, that he has risen from the dead, and he is Lord. Then your life is filled with something more. After that day, I didn't want to leave the disciples anymore. Let's just do whatever we can with him and for him. And there wasn't a whole lot more with him once he had ascended into heaven. But he had promised that he would appear to us once in Galilee. So I made my way with several others up there. We didn't know when or where. And so we were sitting around up on the north shore of Galilee, wondering what was to happen next. And then finally we're there, and we got tired of waiting, and Peter says, "I'm going to go fishing." And there were 6 of us, others who said, "Well, we'll come too." We had nothing else to do. We were waiting for Jesus. And we were waiting doing nothing. So we might as well wait and go fishing. So we fished that night. Most of the time, the fisherman, like Simon Peter was before he was following Jesus, he was a fisherman on that lake, and they fished at night. And so there we were, just spending our night. I'm not a fisherman. They just told me what to do, and I was trying to help do it, though it wasn't much because we didn't catch a thing. Finally comes the dawn, and we start rowing towards the shore. And as we get closer, we see someone on the beach. And we're still rowing to get closer. And then a voice comes out, "Did you catch anything?" "No, we didn't catch anything. We've been out all night, didn't catch a thing." And the voice comes, "Throw your net on the other side." And all of a sudden we're thinking, haven't we heard something like this before? Had nothing to lose. One more time, we'll throw the net into the water one more time before we get to shore. We threw it over, start to pull it in, and there were so many fish there, we couldn't hardly pull it in. At that point, somebody, it might have been John, who looked again at the shore and he said, "It's Jesus." Peter looked up, shocked. He's pulling on the net, and when he hears that somebody with better eyes said, "It's Jesus," he looks up, and he just takes off his outer garment, throws it down, jumps in the water, and swims for shore. Of course, when he lets go of the rope, the rest of it were almost pulled in because of the extra weight of the fish and him not pulling his share of the weight. We finally got the fish on board, and we finally rowed ourselves in. As after rowing, we get to the shore and find that there's a fire already there. And he didn't even need our fish for a breakfast. Jesus had prepared a meal for us. Once again, proving his reality. Eating with us to prove he was fully resurrected. there to encourage us and teach us. He can provide for us. You don't have to bring the food to him. He can provide for our every need. Oh, my friends, you will want to make sure that you have the idea of no doubts in your mind. I spent time with him. I sought out experiences with him. I wanted to have all my questions answered. And I wanted to make sure that I had no doubts. If Jesus is alive, I want to be with him. If he's alive, he's Lord. If he's risen from the dead, then things start looking good no matter how else they might look, right? And so I would ask you to seek in your life, to spend time. Here we were just doing fishing, and God appears to speak to our hearts and tell us what we need to hear that day. Sometimes when you don't know what to do, doing nothing might not be the answer. Get busy about something and wait for God to speak to you. Let him erase your doubts, that your service to him might be wonderful and your love from him might be deeper. I would invite you, don't leave home without Jesus. Don't stay home without him either. Wherever you go, whatever you do, let the one you trust completely be there. No more doubts. Just going forward in this life and to the eternity. God bless you.